Welcome back to another episode of the Fifth Quarter Podcast. Appreciate everyone tapping in here on YouTube. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment below. Head on over to our Instagram or TikTok to let us know your playoff takes as we reach the end of the NFL regular season. I'm joined once again by Cole Gaston from Fly Films. Cole, welcome back. We're glad to have you here as we reach the final weeks of the 2025 NFL regular season. Thank you for coming again.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Today, we're going to be breaking down Week 15, previewing Week 16, diving into the playoff races, diving into the MVP movement, seeing which teams are frauds versus real, all the coaching pressure and hot seats. We'll get into all of that. But now that Week 15 is done and you think that the NFL playoff picture is starting to make sense, you're lying to yourself. The AFC is a traffic jam. The NFC is a glimpse of D-Day in World War II, and Week 16 is basically going to be a playoff week before the playoffs. So we're going to tell you which teams you should actually trust and which ones are bound to bust. But without further ado, let's get into it. We'll start in the AFC with the AFC playoff race, a race in which no team is safe. Every team in the AFC right now is trying to grab control of their division, besides maybe the Broncos. But we'll get into that in this segment. You got teams stacked upon once on one side, once on the other side. The wild card spots seem to be flipping every single week, and there's really not a lot of confidence for these teams. Everyone is on each other's tail. So as we get into the AFC playoff picture, we got the Broncos sitting at the 1 seed, one game above the Patriots, who just lost to the Bills. So you got the Patriots at the 2 seed, the Jaguars at the 3 seed, and the Steelers at the 4 seed. All three of these teams only holding a 1-game lead on other teams in their division. And then when it comes to the wild card teams, the Chargers actually hopped the Bills, so both teams sit at 10-4, and then you have the Texans as the 7th seed at 9-5. Gaston, when we get into this playoff picture, you see the Broncos at the 1 seed. When you look at the Broncos, do you think this is a team with their remaining schedule that is going to finish at the top of the AFC?
I think so. I think they're easily the top team in the AFC. I used to think it was New England, but that game against the Bills kind of let me down. I don't think it's a game to look too deep into, though, because I think when the playoffs come in, things are going to be different. It's a different mentality. The Patriots can lose a game, and it's largely not going to affect how they do in the playoffs. But I think Denver's going to win out and be the top seed.
Yeah, looking at Denver's remaining schedule, they face the Jaguars this weekend before facing the Chiefs in Arrowhead on Christmas Day. That's a Thursday night matchup. But without Patrick Mahomes now and the Chiefs that are already eliminated from the playoffs, and we'll see if they decide to sit any of their vets like Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, maybe even Trent McDuffie. I think if we had to tally it up right now, we'd say the Broncos are probably going to win this matchup. And then they end the season facing the Chargers, which the Chargers are a playoff team, but we will see kind of how that goes. The Broncos have to win 2 out of 3 of their remaining games to lock up the number 1 seed. Any tiebreaker scenario, they've already beaten the Patriots in that. So if they were to finish with the same record as the Patriots, the Broncos will get the number 1 seed, first round bye, and home field advantage in Denver, which if anyone knows, Denver's home field advantage is bar to none, one of the best in the NFL. So like we mentioned, they only have to win 2 out of 3 against the Jaguars, the Chiefs, and the Chargers. I think most people would chalk up that Chiefs game as a win. And if that happens, if they were to win against Jacksonville, which could be another rematch in the playoffs upcoming, they would essentially kind of have that locked up. Again, the Broncos win this weekend. They only got to beat one more of the Chiefs or the Chargers to lock up. They could rest everyone in Week 18 if they win the next 2 games or win one of their next 2 games and have the Patriots lose. But we'll move on to the Patriots, who this Sunday will face the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday Night Football. Baltimore is favored by 3 points as of right now. And the Patriots are coming off of a humiliating loss, went up 21-0, dominated the first quarter and early into the second quarter, forced 3 straight punts, 2 3-and-outs to start the game on defense from the Buffalo Bills, and then just kind of collapsed. They let up a touchdown before halftime. Then they go and they score a field goal, and they go into halftime up 24-7. And then in the second half, their offense crumbles down. The Bills go and they score 3 unanswered touchdowns to go up. Then TreVeyon Henderson breaks one loose. Everyone's going crazy. They're up again by a field goal. And then Josh Allen does what he does, goes down, scores a touchdown, leaves about 2 to 3 minutes on the game clock. and the Patriots really just fluttered out, couldn't get the ball moving in a 2-minute drill, and the Buffalo Bills end up winning a thrilling game in Foxborough in a chance where the Patriots, if they would have won the AFC East. But you look at the remainder of the Patriots schedule, like I said, they face the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday Night Football this week, and then they end the season with the Dolphins and the Jets on the schedule. You look at the rest of the season, do you think that they have a chance to go 3-0, 2-1? You look at especially this game, you would probably say they probably beat the Dolphins and the Jets, but they go and they face Baltimore in Baltimore on Sunday Night Football this week. In that game on Sunday Night Football, Gaston, who do you think comes out on top?
I think they're going to win. I think Patriots are going to play pissed off. Mike Vrabel's a good coach. And I think last week was kind of a fluky game against the Bills. And I think also, too, I know Baltimore has something to play for because if they don't win, they're out of the playoff race. But I do think the Patriots are going to win it.
So when you look at this matchup between the Ravens and the Patriots, the Ravens are playing for more. The Ravens are one game behind the Steelers, and they will face them, but they need to catch up and go in to that final week against the Steelers with the same record so they can take that head-to-head. Probably if they lose this week, they fall to 7-8. They probably have no chance of a wild card and a slim chance of winning the division, especially if the Steelers win this week. But who do you think has more to play for? Is this more for the Ravens, or do you think the Patriots? Who does this game? Who needs to win? Who does it matter to more?
I think it matters more to the Ravens, but I think after a loss like you just had against the Bills where you choked the game away, I think it's a huge deal that you win this game against a good opponent. I think if the Patriots beat the Bills, I think I could see them getting complacent and losing this game. But after last week's game, I think they're going to do everything in their power to win this one.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Mike Vrabel is a coach that he says he doesn't like his team to be sleepwalking. He made it a big point after they narrowly escaped the Cincinnati Bengals that, hey, we're playing down to our competition. We're not playing our best football. We want to be here. We're playing here. We need to rise up. We need to play better. And then they answered the next week, and they absolutely put up a clinic on the New York Giants. But I think when you are talking about a team that is kind of rising up and playing better and better every week, a team that's only one game behind them, that's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Really a team that's been slipping under the radar. They're 10-4. They sit at the 3rd seed and potentially can make their way up to the 2nd seed. Probably are not going to get that number 1 seed. That's probably out of the picture. But a team that could very well end up hosting the 7th seed. And as of right now, it's one of their teams in their division, the Houston Texans, who only sit one game behind them. But when you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, they face Denver this week in a very, very good game. Again, a 1 seed versus a 3 seed currently. And then they head to Indianapolis to face Phillip Rivers and the Colts. We'll get into that later. And then they end with an easier game against the Titans. But this is a team that's been slipping under the radar. Gaston, when you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars this year and how they've been playing, especially these past few weeks, kind of how would you describe this team? What does this team mean to you?
I would say they just get shit done. I think they get things done. It's not always pretty. Sometimes it's ugly. Other times it's very well polished. Last week, Trevor Lawrence had 5 touchdowns, best game of his career. There's another games where he's been kind of sloppy. He's been inconsistent. You would think based off the way they've played to be an MVP candidate, but he's not. But he's really good. I think they're going to beat the Titans. I think if they play the Texans, that's going to be very scary for them because they don't have a good history against the Texans. But I still think they're a good number three team in the AFC.
Yeah, so they split their 2 games with the Titans, one of them being an absolutely embarrassing loss where Davis Mills came back in the 4th quarter. They put up, I don't know how many unanswered points, and they won that game. But I think more than likely the Jacksonville Jaguars are for sure going to be in the playoff. We'll see if they win this week. That's, I think, a huge indicator. I'm not sure if they're tied with the Texans, who gets the tiebreaker. I think it goes to division record then. We can maybe look into that later. But a team that's right below them, a team that just won on Monday and just absolutely dog-walked the Miami Dolphins, really put that Dolphin to sleep, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They sit 1 game above the Ravens. Again, they will play them again, but they sit at 8-6. This is probably the winner of this division. If it's going to be the Steelers, they're going to be the 4 seed, and they're going to play probably either the Chargers, the Bills, the Texans. I mean, who knows with the wild card race, but nonetheless, this is a division that's probably going to be the 4th seeded division. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they seem to play really good some weeks, really bad the other weeks. And I think the main thing is they've had inconsistency from the defensive side, something that has really lacked this year, which we expected them. They're the highest paid defense. They brought in Aaron Rodgers, and to Aaron Rodgers' credit, the offense has played phenomenally well this year. Arthur Smith, I think we're getting the most out of certain players like Jalen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, guys that have kind of been thrown away and scrapped by other teams, have been playing their best football of their careers, I think you would say. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is, he's not playing at an MVP level, but I think he's played significantly better than past guys like Mason Rudolph, like Kenny Pickett, like Big Ben in his last few years. He's really elevated the offense. They're also getting very good work out of guys like Jonnu Smith. DK Metcalf, again, had a phenomenal touchdown against the Dolphins. But when you look at the Steelers, Gaston, when you look at where they are, kind of what they look like, more than likely they will probably win the division, and they'll probably be that 4 seed playing the top rated wildcard team, which I think it might be the Bills. It could be the Chargers, could be the Texans. Regardless, it's going to be a difficult matchup. When you look at the Steelers and who they're going to face in the playoffs, do you think the Steelers are even going to make it past the first round in the playoffs, the way things are currently slated?
I think they're very similar to how they are every year. They're good enough to have a winning record and make the playoffs, but they're not designed to go further than the first round at most. I don't think that I don't think they would do well against Denver. I think they would have a chance against a team like New England. And I say that just because they have so many veterans on their team. And I think what makes this Steelers team different than other years is they have Aaron Rodgers. All their other quarterbacks they've had before have been game managery. And I don't think they've had that it factor like Aaron Rodgers has. And when things are close in a big game, I think Aaron Rodgers can still make a play or two. I don't think they're a Super Bowl team, but I do think they're a sleepy team in the first round just because of Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, a team that's right on their back, a team that they could potentially face in the first round is the Los Angeles Chargers, coming off a very impressive win. Again, probably the most injured team, or probably has the most star players, the most active starters, maybe the most all-pro level players on IR. They sit at 10-4. They've just succumbed through all these injuries. Just a true testament to Jim Harbaugh, Jesse Minter, and just a phenomenal job of battling through injuries, having these ugly, ugly wins. But they have a very difficult schedule. They sit at 10-4. They're tied for the 5 seed with the Bills, have the tiebreaker over the Bills. But they have to face the Cowboys in Dallas, as well as facing the Texans and the Broncos. Probably one of the most difficult 3-game stretches at the end of the season, maybe of any team in the NFL here. But you look at the Chargers and their schedule, they sit at 10-4. I mean, those 3 games, you could go either way on any of them. Who knows with the Broncos? The Broncos could be sitting their starters and they might get a free win there. But you look at those final 3 games, Gaston, what do you think the record of the Chargers is going to be, and how is that going to affect their playoff seeding?
I think they'll beat the Cowboys. I don't think they're going to beat the Texans. The Texans are really hot right now. I think the only chance they have at beating the Broncos is if they rest their starters. I think that's a very high possibility. I think ironically right now, the AFC playoff picture is kind of where I think it's going to be at come the end of the season. I think it's pretty much set. It's just a matter of who's going to take that, who's going to be the leader of the AFC North.
I 100% agree with you. I think that if it goes down to where it's a tie between the Ravens and the Steelers and we get a Week 18 matchup, that's great. We all want to see that. We all want to see that matchup on Sunday Night Football, just like it was with the Vikings and the Lions last year. 2 great teams, 2 teams that are fighting for a division title, fighting for a home playoff game. We want to see that as fans. We want to see that battle. We want to see that Aaron Rodgers, possibly his last game. He had that heartbreaker in Green Bay, losing that to miss the playoffs, kind of a repeat of that, but in Steelers. And then also on the other side, seeing Lamar Jackson, one of the most entertaining, most dynamic players that the league has ever seen. We as fans want to see that matchup, and I think we'd be very blessed if we got to see that in Week 18. But a team that we mentioned earlier, the Bills sit at the 6th seed, had an improbable comeback to beat the Patriots, sit 1 game behind the Patriots. But like I mentioned earlier, if the Patriots, they could lose to the Ravens, but beat the Dolphins and the Bills, the Dolphins and the Jets, their final 2 weeks, they would still win the division because they would have a better head-to-head in the division. They have a division standings, even though they were 1-1 with the Bills. The Bills, because they lost the Dolphins earlier in the season, they can finish with a 4-2 record in the division at best, whereas the Patriots, if they were to win those final 2 weeks, would have a 5-1 division and would still win the division. But I think the Bills might be the most dangerous team in the AFC right now. Their defense is still pretty lackluster, but the way their offense has been running the ball, and Josh Allen, obviously we've seen him play his best in the playoffs despite all those losses to the Chiefs. The Bills, they sit at the 6th seed. They're at 10-4. Their playoff probability is over 99%. So obviously they're very favored. But you look at the Bills. Do you think if they were not to win the division, let's say the Patriots win the division, are the Bills the most dangerous wildcard team? Are they the most dangerous team in the AFC? Where do the Bills kind of sit in your power rankings in the AFC?
I think this is their best chance they're ever going to have to win a Super Bowl. I think if they don't win a Super Bowl this year, they're not going to win one with Josh Allen. You don't have Mahomes. You have a lot of inexperienced quarterbacks playing the playoffs this year. This is your chance to really go all the way. So I think they are the most dangerous team in the AFC. That's what I'd be the most scared of if I was another team that wasn't the Bills. So that's what I think.
And speaking of scary teams, a team that sits at the 7 seed that no one wants to face right now is the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans, after starting the year 0-3, are now 9-5. They've gone 9-2 over their last 11 games, 6-game win streak currently, before they face a weak Raiders team this week. And then they face the Chargers and Colts to end the season, and two teams that are fighting for their playoff chances. But this is the hottest team in the NFL right now. I don't think you can debate this. You can maybe say the Broncos are pretty good, but the Texans are dominating. A 20-point win this past week over the Cardinals. Before that, a 10-point win on Sunday Night Football against the Chiefs in Arrowhead. Before that, beating a division game against the Colts in Indianapolis. Before that, beating the Bills, who sit at one of the most dangerous teams in the AFC. So the Houston Texans have just been thumping people. Their defensive line has been unreal. DeMeco Ryans in the defense have been trampling people. I think this might be the hottest team in the NFL, one of the most dangerous teams, a team that you do not want to face in the wild card. When you look at your hometown Houston Texans, Gaston, what about this team scares you if you were to be, let's say, a team like New England, a team that is going to be hosting a home playoff game and then having to face the Texans? What are you least looking forward to when you face this team in the playoffs?
That defensive front. I think they have a really strong defense. They're very physical. They cause turnovers. They get sacks. I think the offense is doing fine. They're kind of just getting the job done. But their defense is elite right now, and they're playing really hot. And I think they're in a really good rhythm. I think that's kind of the scary thing, especially because a lot of these teams in the AFC have quarterbacks who don't have a lot of playoff experience. Bo Nix hasn't really played in the playoffs. Trevor Lawrence really hasn't. Drake May hasn't at all. Your only real player that has experience in the playoffs is going to be Aaron Rodgers and Josh Allen. So I think if you have a quarterback in the playoffs, where I think the playoffs tend to be more defensive, I think that defensive front's the scariest thing, and I think that's what makes him so scary going forward.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, in the playoff experience, that's a great point. The AFC really doesn't have. Bo Nix has played one playoff game. They got destroyed by the Bills last year in that game. And then you look at other teams, Drake May, no experience. Aaron Rodgers, a plethora of experience, even if it might be negative experience. He still has won a Super Bowl, still has that playoff experience, especially in the cold as well. So I think, like you mentioned earlier, Josh Allen, listen, the Chiefs are not in the playoffs this year. That has been your Achilles heel, your kryptonite. This is your year to do it. You know, you might not even have Lamar Jackson in it. So I think for a player like that, if CJ Stroud can elevate his game, he has some good playoff experience. You know, they came in and whooped the Chargers last year. If CJ Stroud can be at the top of his game, if Aaron Rodgers can play to his ability that we know he can be at, and if Josh Allen just continues to do what he's been doing this past few weeks, those are probably the three teams with the most experience and three teams that could really take the AFC this year in an AFC race that seems to be wide open. But enough with the AFC. Let's get into the NFC because this is insane. Teams are fighting. There's probably going to be a few 10-win teams in the NFC that aren't going to make the playoffs, but we'll start at the top of the NFC, and that is MVP level Matthew Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams. They sit at 11-3 with a massive matchup on Thursday Night Football versus the Seattle Seahawks. What a matchup on Thursday night. The Thursday night matchups this year have been up, they've been down, But this game last time, Sam Darnold throws 4 interceptions. I think they had 5 or 6 turnovers total, the Seahawks did. But both teams are 11-3. The Rams having that tiebreaker over beating Seattle earlier this year. But now if they lose, they fall into the wild card. But they sit at the number 1 seed as of now, can continue to hold on to that with a win this Thursday. When you look at this Thursday night matchup versus Seahawks, the 12th man in Seattle, MVP Matthew Stafford, no Davante Adams. Who do you like winning this game? Who takes home the cake this Thursday?
I have a crazy pick. I think the Seahawks can do it. And the reason why I say that is last time they played, Sam Darnold threw 4 picks, but what a lot of people forget is he also led his team down the field, and they had a chance to win the game with a game-winning field goal. And last week he just did that against the Colts team. They're depleted. They're starting someone who has less hit mobility than me and Owen, but that's still a good defense, and that's the thing with Sam Darnold is he can make all the plays. The question is, can he do it in the big moments? And I think this game is either going to prove that he can or he can't. Right? I think last year you saw whenever he played, when he was on Minnesota and they played the Rams and they played Detroit, I think this game's going to be very similar to that. And I believe in Sam Darnold. I think he can pull it off. But if he doesn't, I think it's going to be really troubling with the playoffs coming up.
Thursday night football, an insanely important matchup for the division. You got the 12th man behind you. All these difficult games, like the game at the end of the regular season last year with the Vikings in Detroit, in the playoffs against the Rams in Arizona, more of a playoff game for the Rams than for Minnesota, you would say. So he finally gets to have a big game, but it's at home. I think that's going to be a huge factor. The 12th man's going to be riding behind him, and I think he'll have a significantly better game. Now, no Davante Adams for the Rams, but the Rams' running game has really improved this year. Kyren Williams has not had to take as many carries. They've really split those with Blake Corum as he's emerged. They have that 2-back system now, and you got Matthew Stafford playing MVP level ball behind an improved O-line. I think this is going to be a close game. I think it's going to be within a field goal. I'm with you. I'm going to take the Seahawks in this matchup, but your Bears sit at the number 2 seed, probably cheering on the Seahawks. After losing to the Packers the following week, they bounce back with a win against the Browns and now face the Packers on Saturday Night Football because there's no college football this week. You look ahead to the Packers, then you face the 49ers, then you face the Lions. An absolute gauntlet, probably the most difficult schedule remaining on the NFC side. If the Bears really want to go into the playoffs hot, really want to prove themselves to the rest of the NFC, they got to probably take 2 of these 3 games and for sure got to beat the Packers. Some would say maybe their daddy if they want to win this division. You look ahead to these last 3 games, maybe start with the Packers. How important is this game for Caleb Williams, for Ben Johnson, and how do you think this game on Saturday versus the Packers is going to go? It is at home in Chicago. Not sure what the weather's like. Probably going to be pretty cold, but you look ahead to these games. What are you looking for from your Bears? How do you think the game's going to go?
I think it's a legacy game for Caleb. It's an early one. I think it's going to go very well. I think as the last game time they played the Packers, if you watch the game, you watch Caleb throughout the game, that was the first time that Caleb, I think, really looked loose beyond a couple of drives. And that last play of the game was a fluky interception. It was just things just didn't go well like they wanted to on that last play, but it was a stupid play. And last week against the Browns, he looked really good, and that's a good Browns defense. So I think this week they're going to win this game. I think they should have beat them the first time they had a chance to. They just played sloppy in the first half, and then that really stupid interception they had in the game. And I think they really do need to win because, like you said, the NFC is so good that there's a chance they can miss the playoffs. So, I mean, this is a really important game to win. I think this and the game against Detroit really determine everything for the Bears.
Yeah, it really helps because they sit at 10-4, and the team that's in the 3 seed, the Philadelphia Eagles, sit at 9-5. The Bears have that tiebreaker over Philly. So I think if the Bears can win this game against the Packers, they set themselves up to control their own destiny and win the division. And if they win the division, they very well could be sitting at the number 2 seed. Probably not going to be the number 1 seed because the winner of the Seahawks and the Rams on Thursday is going to be 12-3, even if they're 11-4. it's going to be hard to catch up. But that Eagles tiebreaker is huge, and a win against the Packers would set them up to win the division and get a home field, at least probably 1 or 2 games with a home field advantage, and maybe even more, maybe an NFC championship. But let's not look too far ahead, because to be the best, you got to beat the best. And they did beat this team, the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles have had such an up and down season. They finally bounced back with a shutout win versus their former quarterback, Kenny Pickett, and the Raiders. They dominate 31-0 following a 3-game skid. This week, they'll face the Commanders in D.C. No Jaden Daniels, shut down for the rest of the season, before facing the Bills in Buffalo and another game against the Commanders. They're really getting lucky now that Jaden Daniels is shut down. The Commanders are kind of throwing it in. They said, we'll just kind of tank without calling it tanking for the rest of the season. And then they have that sandwich with the Bills in the middle. But you look at the Eagles' schedule, pretty favorable. Again, 1 game against the Bills, 2 against the Commanders. If your Bears don't win on Thursday, the Eagles could be coming for that number 2 seed. You look at the rest of the Eagles season, where do you think the Eagles are going to end up in terms of seeding?
I think they're going to win 2 out of 3. I would be very shocked if they lost any of those games against Washington. That Bills game's a toss-up. I think right now, I think they're going to win the division, no problem. I think at the very worst, they'll be at the 3rd seed. I think that the Bears or the Packers are going to be above them in the conference standings. I don't think that Tampa Bay is going to get much better. I think whoever's the NFC South team is going to struggle to make it in. I don't think they're going to have a better record than them.
And the Eagles, to win the division, they simply just have to win 1 of the remaining 3 games. The only way for the Cowboys to make the playoffs would be for the Eagles to lose all 3 of the remaining games and the Cowboys to win all 3 of the remaining games. But with no Jaden Daniels, Marcus Mariota would have to pull off 2 miracle games for that to happen. So more than likely, this next team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who sit at 7-7, will likely be the 4 seed. You never know, because the Carolina Panthers also sit at 7-7, but the Buccaneers currently have the tiebreaker. But the Panthers and the Buccaneers get to face off 2 times the remaining 3 games that will likely settle this division. Currently, like mentioned, the Buccaneers sit at the 4th seed, will likely stay there unless the Panthers move in to the 4th seed. But a very interesting matchup last week. They lose on a game-losing field goal versus Kirk Cousins, the Kyle Pitts legacy game on Thursday Night Football. And then the Panthers lose against Tyler Shuck and the New Orleans Saints. Both of these teams really do not seem to want this division. Baker Mayfield has struggled in the latter half of the season. But when you look at the Panthers and the Buccaneers, I guess my question is less so of what the Buccaneers look like in their future. But when you look at the Buccaneers and Panthers and the remaining schedules, who do you think is going to come away with the NFC South title? Will it remain with the Buccaneers like it has for these past few years?
I think it can go either way. Again, 2 of their last 3 games are against the Panthers. I think that kind of says enough on its own. I think they'll beat a really bad Dolphins team.
And then you look at the Panthers, they face the Seahawks in their sandwich of games. So again, one team gets to face the Seahawks and the other team has to face the Dolphins and their team. A little bit easier on the Buccaneers side.
Huge difference in where the teams are at, just a little bit.
It'll be very interesting. How crazy would it be if these teams were to tie this week, go into the final week and face it? I think a lot of people really like to cheer for Baker Mayfield. They really like his personality and what he's about. And then there's a lot of people that are cheering for the underdog and the Carolina Panthers, who have just flat out stunk for the past few years. But regardless of these divisions, let's talk about the wild card in the NFC. Like we mentioned earlier, the Seahawks sit at 11-3, better records than every team but the Rams on the division side. The Seahawks have really been up and down, but have really made a strong case for one of the Super Bowl contending teams, one of the best teams in the NFC, and I think arguably one of the best teams in football. When you look at the Seahawks' remaining schedule, like I said, they'll face the Rams on Thursday Night Football in the most crucial game of the year for them to this date, before facing the Panthers and the 49ers on the road. And let's not forget about the 49ers. We'll get into them in a second, but they are not far behind these teams. You look at the Seahawks, probably one of the strongest contenders between the wild cards, but this could be really similar to what we saw with the Vikings last year, where, there might be a team that has 13, 14 wins and is a wild card. If you're one of those division teams facing them, just like we mentioned with the Bills or the Texans on the AFC side, kind of what's your game plan to beating a team that is red hot on both sides of the ball?
I think it's all going to come down to Sam Darnold. The defense is going to do their job. I don't worry about that. The question is, how is Sam Darnold going to perform in a high pressure moment? I personally think he's going to do good, but that's the question that he's struggled to show in his career up to this point is, when it's this point of the season, how well do you do when everything's on the line? So I think that's going to say a lot. I think it's funny that they play the Niners. I think the Niners are kind of an opposite team. The Niners have been kind of inconsistent this season, but they're looking a lot better now, and they have a team that has a lot of playoff experience. So I think the games are going to say a lot about Darnold is against the Rams and I think against the Niners.
Yeah, like you mentioned, the 49ers have really been up and down, but as of late, they're riding a 4-game win streak before facing Phillip Rivers and the Colts on Monday Night Football. And then they head to face your Bears and the Seahawks at home. So a very difficult schedule, 3 teams that are going to be likely competing for playoff spots as the regular season kind of wraps up in these last few weeks. But you look at the 49ers, I think this is a team that is very underrated. Again, they really make the most out of everything. They got no Nick Bosa. They got Kittle back and had a phenomenal game, but a team that just battles through injuries year in, year out, and just consistently gets the best out of what they put on the field. Doesn't matter the injuries, doesn't matter, what's going on with the quarterback even. You have Mac Jones stepping up and they're still winning games. But you look at the 49ers, what from this season in particular impresses you the most from the 49ers?
How they bounce back with injuries. Because some teams start off really good, and once they have a couple injuries, that's the thing with the Niners that's happened before, is they'll have a really good season, and then the next season, a couple of their star players will get injured, and they kind of really decline. Like, that's something that happened to them last year. And this is kind of like, the funny part is, like, now it's actually going the opposite way, where they're actually a lot stronger now. It doesn't matter who they're playing at quarterback or what happens with the receivers. They're doing good. They don't have Brandon Ayuk. Ricky Pearsall was injured for a good part of the year. They had some players on defense injured, and right now they're in a really good spot. So I think they're a sneaky team to watch out for.
And then getting into our final wild card team, a team that is surprisingly at the 7th seed, and that's the Green Bay Packers. Coming off a rough, close loss versus the Broncos in Denver, they could go from the 7th seed to the 2 seed with a win versus the Bears in Chicago this Saturday. Absolute chaos when we talk about the NFC playoff picture. You can rise from the 2 seed, drop down to the 7th seed like the Packers do, and go right back up to the 2nd seed with a win against your division rival. You look at the Broncos, they beat your Bears, they face your Bears again. What from the Packers impresses you the most? Because I think this is maybe the best Packers team we've seen since maybe 2020, 2021, back when Aaron Rodgers won his back-to-back MVP campaign.
I think just in the game I watched whenever they played the Bears, they have a really good offense, and I thought they had good play calling. I think they have a lot of good weapons. I think Jordan Love's playing really good football right now. I think losing Micah Parsons is going to be a huge detriment, though, because that's a player that changes your whole defense. I think one of the most valuable things you can have on defense was a great pass rusher like Micah Parsons, who you can argue is generational, and I think losing him is going to really hurt them, though, moving forward, especially as they play the Bears. And I think that game's really not going to go in their favor. I'm trying to remember who they have next, who they have left in the season too.
So they face the Bears, like we mentioned, and then they face the Ravens and the Vikings.
I think they'll win the other 2 games. I don't think they're going to beat the Bears.
Yeah, I think it really, whoever wins that matchup this Saturday night is probably going to take the division. The Lions are a little too far back. They have those tiebreakers losses, both losses to the Green Bay Packers. And then the Bears will face the Lions again and try to get back and kind of tie that up. But I think really whoever wins this matchup on Saturday night is really going to take the division, because you see how close the Bears and the Packers are, and then you see the Lions are just a little smidgen behind them. Probably not going to win the division after coming off that loss against the Rams. But that's it when it comes to the NFC playoff picture. Absolute chaos there. Also on the AFC side, chaotic as well. Just the seeding and how close it is. I don't know if we've ever seen a playoff race that has just been so tight every single week. And this week's matchups are just unbelievable. Like we mentioned, you got Bears Packers in a massive, first of all, just an insane rivalry in general. Then you add in the playoff race on top of that, makes it even better. And then you got the Jaguars and Broncos, an absolutely phenomenal game. So we will be tuned in on Sunday. Can't wait to watch that. I'm sure those things will massively shake up the playoff picture. You also got the Ravens and the Patriots on Sunday Night Football. So very looking forward to this upcoming week slate. I know a lot of you will be tuned in with fantasy playoffs, and for most of you will be the second week, could be the third week for some of you. Hopefully not if you're in a league that does that, but that's besides the point. But when it comes to a different race, the MVP race, especially these past 2 weeks, we've seen the odds go absolutely up and down, like the stock exchange in New York. You have Drake May falling a little bit. You got Josh Allen rising up, Matthew Stafford down and up and down. When it comes to the MVP race for you guys, and I think a lot of people are saying Matthew Stafford's probably number one, and then in some order, it's maybe Drake May, Josh Allen. When you look at the MVP race for you, who are your top candidates? Who is your winner as of now?
I would say it goes Matthew Stafford, then Josh Allen. And I think it's going to be Matthew Stafford just because he's been consistently good all year and just how dominant their team's been. I think with Josh Allen, he's had to put the team on his back in a lot of ways, and I think that would help him out for the MVP. I think Drake May's been really good, but I think that loss against the Bills is going to hurt him in getting that award. But I think it's not a huge deal. It's his second year. So I think it's Stafford, though, if I was going to pick someone right now.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, too. I don't think Josh Allen is too far behind, but Drake May had a really solid case to solidify himself as a top two contender with that win. With that win, they would have been the first team in the league to win their division, would have ended the Bills' 5-year win streak of the AFC East title. But he only had 155 passing yards, his lowest of the season, his first game under 200 yards. He had 2 rushes, touchdowns. I'll give him his credit there, but no passing touchdowns through the air. So really kind of had a chance to solidify himself if he would have had a better second half and got the ball moving and really just got the win overall. You know, the wins mean more than anything, but really just kind of let that slip from his hands and kind of let Josh Allen sneak into maybe that 2-3 spot. It's arguable, but I think Matthew Stafford, like you said, is probably the clear number one as of now. And with the solid last 3 weeks, especially this game on Thursday, that's really going to be the big determiner. Because if they were to lose against the Seahawks, maybe he has a rough game, or maybe they just lose in a nail biter. Regardless, they would slip from the number 1 seed to the 5 seed probably. So a huge chance for Matthew Stafford to solidify himself this week, coming off a big win versus former team, the Lions. But when we get into kind of teams that we might be pretty good, might be pretty bad, it's time to put these teams through the fraud test. And we'll start in the AFC. Pick one team from the AFC right now, just off the top of your head. One team in the AFC that you think is a fraud, and give your reasoning why you think this team is probably going to be a one and done in the playoffs.
I'd say Steelers.
And how come?
Their history. I mean, they have Aaron Rodgers, and they're kind of the same team as they were last year. I feel like we talk about the Steelers the same way we do every year. And I just don't think it's going to be anything different this year. I think if it's going to be different, it's not going to be because of Mike Tomlin or the defense. It's going to be because of Aaron Rodgers.
All right, let's take it over to the NFC side then. Same thing. What is one team that in the NFC that scares you? One team that you think might be a fraud and is going to be a one and done in the playoffs?
I think I would say Tampa, but I feel like that's a little too obvious. But I think Philly, just because of how inconsistent they are, it kind of reminds me of the 2023 season where they started off really good and end up did not do well in the playoffs. First year after a Super Bowl, teams usually do not perform as well. And they've kind of been inconsistent. I know they beat the Raiders a lot, but when you're starting Kenny Pickett and your whole team is given up and you fired your OC, I don't think that that's really that impressive of a win.
I know there's been a lot of chatter about Nick Sirianni. You know, some people in the media say, this guy needs to get fired. And coming off a Super Bowl, a team that's going to make the playoffs, going to probably win their division, maybe be a 2-3 seed. It's a little chaotic and a little crazy to kind of start throwing him in the pressure cooker that fast. But when it comes to the coaching, we're nearing the end of the season. We've had a few coaches be fired, like Brian Callahan in Tennessee, Brian Dable up in New York. there's a few coaches and even a few quarterbacks that right now they know that every snap that they're taking matters. They're really putting up film for their owners, their GMs on, are we going to keep this guy? Some decisions have already been made. Some decisions, maybe the GMs are going to look at these last few weeks to really see if this is a guy that's going to remain on a roster or if we're going to cut him, waive him, trade him. I want you to pick one coach that you think is going to be canned at the end of the year, and maybe not a more obvious one, but one that you think is the most interesting change in coaching that is going to happen at the end of this season.
I think the obvious one would be Stefanski on the Browns, even though they haven't fired him yet. I think one that would be interesting would be Aaron Glenn, and the reason I say that's interesting is because they have a new GM, and he's a first-year coach, but this has happened. First-year coaches have got fired, and the Jets have been an absolute dumpster fire this year. They've already had 3 different starting quarterbacks. They fired their defensive coordinator, who was established in the league for a long time. And it's just clearly dysfunctional over there. I think that's one that I could see that's kind of interesting. I think the other candidate that you'd kind of bring up would be Pete Carroll, just because everything there is it's just a mess. I mean, Pete Carroll's been good everywhere he's been except the Raiders.
No, that's a fair point. It'd be really surprising to see a one and done in Pete Carroll, especially coming off, Tom Brady authorizing that and really ownership taking a massive swing at bringing this guy in to really establish the culture. Same thing for Aaron Glenn, a guy that was brought in to establish culture. Seeing Steve Wilkes fired and kind of blaming that on him, I don't really know if that's fair. There can just be a lack of talent that causes defenses to be bad. Defense needs more talent. They don't have a quarterback that can necessarily carry more of a load and elevate a team like a defense can, unless you maybe have a Myles Garrett like Stefanski does down there in Cleveland. But I want to ask you the same question, but when it comes to quarterbacks, a quarterback that you think is probably not going to be on their team next year, maybe the most interesting quarterback that you think is not going to be on their current roster next year.
That's a really good question. I think I got 3 that kind of really stick out to me. Geno Smith, Justin Fields, and Tua. I think those are really interesting because a lot of those quarterbacks, those teams made multi-year commitments to. Those aren't 1-year starters. That was not the design of their contracts. But I don't think you can realistically start those guys next year on opening day, like the opening week of the season, and be like, yeah, these guys are our guys after you've already benched them, after they've already struggled this much, especially when you're trying to keep the new coaches, especially if these coaches are trying to keep their jobs. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with them because I don't think they're guys that you can they're expensive and I don't think you want to just cut them. But I also don't think you want to start them either.
No, that's a very fair point. I'll pose you this question in response to that. So you look at a team like, let's say the Raiders, they got Geno, like you mentioned, the Jets, the Dolphins. The Dolphins draft pick isn't going to be as high as the other 2 teams, but maybe this is more so for the Raiders and for the Jets. Do you think that these teams are going to draft a quarterback with their high first-round pick? That's probably both of these teams are going to be drafting in the top 10, maybe even top 5.
I think the Raiders and the Jets will. I think the way the draft is set up right now and the way their teams are going to finish out, I think it's going to be between the Raiders and the Jets. I think they're going to be the 2 teams with the worst records, and I think both of them are going to get a quarterback. So one will get Mendoza, the other's going to get Dante Moore. I think Cleveland's going to miss out, and they'll probably ride through Shedeur and just ride the Shedeur Sanders train for another year. I think that could be entertaining. I think with the Dolphins, though, I think you brought up, I don't think they're going to be able to draft a quarterback right away. I think if anything, it may be a tank season. Kind of like what the Bengals did with Andy Dalton back in 2019. And then Miami's not going to get a guy until the year after because I don't think this quarterback class is that deep for first-round talent if you're going to get a guy in the first round. I think unless you're a top 3 pick or top 4 pick, I don't think you're going to get a quarterback that you want.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with you. But going back to the playoff picture, there's a few teams that this week, if they win, maybe a few losses by another teams, they have a chance to make the playoffs in week 16. Again, 3 weeks from the playoffs, they have a chance to solidify themselves. We'll start in the AFC. The New England Patriots, like mentioned earlier, they will face the Ravens on Sunday Night Football. And if the Texans lose their game earlier in the day, the Patriots with a win could win a playoff spot, not the division, but win at least a playoff chance. And that's if the Texans lose to the Raiders, which you don't expect to happen. But I want to know, for these different situations that I'm about to bring up, what do you think are the chances that this happens? So we'll start like the one I just mentioned. Patriots beat the Ravens and the Texans lose to the Raiders. How likely is this?
I don't think it's likely at all. I think it's 0 to 10%, unless some crazy stuff happens in Houston and the stadium burns down. I think that the Texans are going to win that game.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. All right, how about this one? The Eagles have to beat the Commanders to win their division this weekend. How likely is that?
100%. I'm going 100%. I'm going 100%. I believe that they will take the division, but they will also possibly lose pretty early in the playoffs.
100 is crazy. I mean, it is any given Sunday. That's the transition, but
okay, maybe not 100. I'll go 80. 80. That's a little disrespectful to Washington, and Marcus Mariota seems like a nice guy, so I'm gonna give it 80% Eagles.
That's fair. Those are the only ones that I know of. There might be some crazy mathematical ones where it's possible, but when you look at the NFC playoff picture, it's an absolute nightmare with how close the teams are. You know, the Lions are still scrapping in. The Panthers still got the chance to win their division with their 2 games against the Buccaneers coming up. It's really just chaotic. And then, I mean, the NFC West in general, you got the 10-4 49ers and the 11-3 Seahawks, 11-3 Rams. Just an absolute nightmare situation, but it really, really could have a decent chance, especially if the Seahawks win, for the 49ers to kind of sneak up in there. But that's enough talking about these crazy playoffs. I mean, that we've talked about the playoffs so much that we need to get into a new topic, and that is quarterback trustworthiness. We've seen from Bo Nix, he's had some massive games this year, and then we've seen from other weeks, like Drake May has a big matchup this week, doesn't really come through with that. I think there's a few quarterbacks that you could say that you really trust this year. I think Josh Allen, maybe Matthew Stafford, Bo Nix, but outside of those 3 names, are there any other quarterbacks that you truly trust in the league?
I trust Purdy a lot.
Okay.
I think he's played really
one.
I mean, look in his career, unless he's injured, he's going to be really, really solid. This is going to sound kind of odd, but I have a certain level of trust with Aaron Rodgers. Just because he's Aaron Rodgers, and I think, yeah, he's not the same, but he's still Aaron Rodgers. The one that I have that's probably going to throw things off a little bit is I have a lot of trust in Caleb Williams. And the reason I say that is because, I mean, I know I'm biased, but the guy's clutch, right? He's not – the issue with Caleb Williams, I think, is he's not as consistent as he should be. But when the moment's big, he shows up and he makes good plays. The only time I haven't really seen him do that was that last game against the Packers. But even then, he led them down the field. It was just one stupid play. He just anticipated badly where Kmet was going to be. So I'd probably stick with those ones. Trying to think who else may possibly be that I trust a lot.
I actually have Jared Goff. Baker. Wow, Baker, really? What has Baker done in the last few weeks to earn your trust? Because he's really gone downhill as the season's gone on. I think he's battling through injury. You can cut him some slack there. But he started off the first 4 or 5 weeks, MVP candidate, maybe top of that, and has really just kind of fallen off a cliff. And he's gotten some receivers back. You know, Ibuka isn't playing his best. Mike Evans comes back. And we just cannot see them win the game. We cannot see Baker Mayfield really shine. How come you trust Baker Mayfield?
I trust Baker Mayfield just because of his experience. I think, like you said it, I think he's injured right now. But I think the way he's wired, I trust him. The other guy that I have a lot of trust in, I think, is I'm going to go with – I mean, Matthew Stafford doesn't count, right? Because they're guaranteed to be in it.
All right, I'll pose you one. How about Jared Goff? What's your trust level with Jared Goff?
I think he's a regular season warrior. I think he plays really good. He has good stats. He's a good quarterback. But I don't know if I trust him during the biggest moments unless he's playing the Rams.
And they just came off a loss versus the Rams too.
Yeah, but in the playoffs, though, he plays well against them.
It's true. It's true. The Lions are not having their best year, but I don't think they're a team that is awful, to say the least. I think, no one really wants to face them. especially just how much talent they have. But their secondary, man, with Brian Branch's injury, their secondary is obsolete. It's really just no issue. If you can withstand the pass rush from Aiden Hutchinson and the front seven, you really have all day to kind of let your receivers get open. It's almost like everyone playing against that secondary is like Tyreek Hill back in his prime days. They're open by 5 yards. So we can move on to the next topic as it pertains to the Super Bowl and who is going to make it all the way. If you had to pick your safest pick on who you believe is going to make the Super Bowl, one team in the NFL, your life is on the line. The aliens are pointing the gun at you. Who is going to the Super Bowl?
It's either the Rams, in my opinion, or the Niners.
It's hard for me, as much as I have respect for the Niners, and I think they're a sneaky team to make the NFC Conference Championship game. I just think with the injury to Joey Bosa and Fred Warner, I don't know if I can trust them to go to the Super Bowl. I think they have the talent on the offensive side of the ball. They have a phenomenal coach, a phenomenal defensive coordinator with Saleh. But with the injuries to two of your best players on defense, I just don't see this team going to the Super Bowl. I think their ceiling is the NFC Championship game. But I really think that through what the injuries that they've gone through, with having Mac Jones in there for like 5 weeks, they've really gotten the most out of their players. And I think they've done a phenomenal job. But I mean, the injuries, the star players, the leadership that's been injured, it's really hard for me to say that they've gone to. But I do respect that. And I think the Rams, like you said, if anyone had to pick, they're probably going to pick the Rams or the Broncos. Obviously, it's the 1 seed. They've done the most to prove it. But who knows in the AFC? The AFC is really up for anyone. I mean, the Bills, too, the way they've been playing, if they continue to dominate the way they have these past few weeks and just overcome those hiccups, I think we very well could see them finally representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Fifth Quarter Podcast. Big thanks to Gaston at Fly Films on Instagram for joining in once again and breaking down all of the Week 15 chaos and the massive Week 16 slate ahead. If you enjoyed the show, smash the subscribe button here on YouTube. Drop your playoff predictions in the comment section. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the Fifth Quarter Media. We'll be back after Week 17 when things really start to lock in, just ahead of the final regular season week. Appreciate you all for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.